If you talk about the fossil economy of the Middle East, that's also going to diminish after maybe 1 or 2 decades. So my suggestion, panelists, I would like to have their comments that we should stay away from any grouping, any party, anything, and we should handle it diplomatically with Iran or Saudi or with Israel and America.
Actually, we scaled down our role in Middle East cautiously, if I'm not wrong. We assured in the late 70s to the Israelis that we will never be the threat to you again. And it was during the Islamic resurgence period of General Zia that we assured, and that's where we even started to have connection with them. And after them, very successfully, we have stayed away from Middle Eastern conflict, whether it was Yemen, it was Iraq, it was even Kuwait. We stayed away from them. We have convinced them that we are definitely non Arabs. So it is a conscious policy, and I think we will continue with them. As Marshall Saab said, our elite is convinced, and especially the institutional elite, that we should control our emotions and focus on ourselves. Second comment I have basically on Dr. Saba, if possible, and that is the academic side. There is, we have to make a difference between hegemon and the acceptance of hegemon. In Middle East, Israel is definitely a hegemon. It was the just look at the present even instrument conflict. Syrian conflict was concluded with the Israeli Air Force. It was the Israeli Air Force which softened, and Turkish under the Ottoman Ghalaf, they basically advanced their national interest. Exactly like in the last days of the Ottoman Empire, they did. They are doing exactly the national interest now. So Israel, whether we are talking about Yemen, Saudi failure in Yemen was because Israel was not helping them. Saudi survival, maybe slightly our support, but essentially it is the Israeli support which is helping Israel, Saudi Arabia to survive in Iran-Iraq war. So Israel is very much there, but its acceptance may be not there. Similar, I think, Turkey is very much there. Acceptance may be absent. But in case of Iran, they didn't came through the Arab, non-Arab scheme. They came through the sectarian scheme, and that's where they created their acceptance. In case of us, actually, we started to serve Islam, and when we decided to refuse to serve Islam, actually we withdraw. So that's where I think still we need to accept Israel as the hegemon, but acceptance of hegemon or resistance to hegemon is very much there. And that's where we have all these maps from the river to sea and all these old Bible stories and everything which Israel is getting is thanks to the power which Israel have today. So maybe theoretically we need to correct theoretical perspective where we'd like to add the acceptance that may be cultural, maybe economic, but it was coming also during the Abraham Accord. One by one, everybody was accepting Israeli hegemony. And there is a possibility maybe after 4 years of Trump destruction, everybody will accept it.
Its policies and its attacks on Lebanon is also mattered in the Middle East. So, what will be the take on from Pakistan side? It is also be more relevant to discuss on it. So, my question is basically relevant to the Lebanon situations. So, the escalation is Lebanon. Much has been discussed on Syria, but Lebanon is less focused. So Lebanon, why it doesn't matter into the overall situations in the Middle East?
Side that on this growing conflict. So you have talked about the implications for Pakistan in those growing conflict, and we know that Pakistan is not taking sides directly, but it is showcasing its neutral stance and is trying to be an actor somehow in this growing conflict. So how can Pakistan basically leverage its diplomatic channels in the Middle East to play a part in this growing conflict, and can it act as a mediator to be a part as an actor of bringing any resolution to this conflict?
How could the Palestinians achieve the national liberation as US continues to support Israel blindly? And to mention that though I'm not a pro-Israelian, but who is the Hamas to tell Palestinians that what is national liberation by simply exploding the Israelis as well, civilians Israel. So yeah, how can they can get the national liberation?
Humanity, not Muslims only, since Palestine is a cause of all humanity. Due to create peace in Palestine, other than the obvious act of course, lobbying and speaking out, taking into account the abilities and limitations of the state of humanity currently. And secondly is a comment from my side, like Mr. Rafat Masood also talked about, a perfect example of Balochistan where competition goes on between the Saudis and the Iranians. So, from my analysis, Pakistan is in a position not to pick and choose. It can actually take control or utilize the situation to further develop Pakistan without choosing and continuing to escalate the competition between these two countries for the betterment of Pakistan.
In Pakistan, in light of the recent situation in Pakistan, which is we have our own genocide going on in Karachi in our Quran district, and what does that implicate for the diplomatic relations between Iran and Pakistan, which are currently being trying to fix, or whatever the efforts are happening?
Just simple question, because I'm a visiting faculty member at Department of Defense and Strategic Studies, and I teach and am also a student of dynamics of threat perception. What are the implications of Pakistan if Iran becomes nuclear tomorrow? And I'll also substitute by your last sentence about this language thing, that it is simple. There is no ummah at the moment. It is amma. If my amma and your amma speak the same language, we are brothers. If not, we are not.
The Kurdish forces names themselves Syrian Democratic Front. Does it reflects that if there will be a constitutional democratic government in Syria, then they will incorporate themselves with the Syrian government?
Greater Israel map of Israel project is mentioned in the Bible. Then why Muslims are not using this religious card as the Israel use this project of Israel card?
You need to understand what is, for a certain course of action, what is our strategic gain, what is the cost, and what is the risk. So that's how you define your policies. We have strategic partnership at the moment with Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and China, to be honest. So when your friends call, you go and help. Balancing does not mean 50-50. Balancing means 80-20, 70-30. Depending on when your foreign policy faces a conflictual situation between two friends or between two countries, you weigh your options based on hardcore reality. What is it that you gain from here versus gain from here? The art is to maximize your option of foreign policy, and the art is to manage one while helping out others. And there are many ways of helping. Pakistan is an important country. We are already the non-permanent member of Security Council for next 2 years. So we have a role to play. Whether it is a two-state Palestinian resolution, whether to confront diplomatically and politically the genocide which is ongoing in Gaza, and whether what happens in Syria. Our Ambassador Marine Akram has already said that we would like a representative government within Syria. So while we don't take sides overtly, while we don't want to get involved actively as far as we can, but Pakistan has a role to play in the Middle East. We have our strategic partnerships, so there is no question on that. So sometimes being neutral is also a stance. It favors one than the other. So neutrality or taking a ambivalent stance, sometimes it does help. So basically, that was part of the first question. Obviously, Saudi Arabia is our strategic partner. So when it comes to choosing politically, when we want to align with Saudi Arabia, we do. When we don't want to, we don't. In terms of Iran, they would have wanted us to say attack Iran, but we did not. In Syria, we had our embassy. The Saudis did not. So politically, when it suits us, we align with them. But generally speaking, it makes sense to take all friends on board while deciding any policy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very, very pertinent points and observations. I think when you talked about trying not to get involved in a conflict, I think I did mention that our main efforts should be not to be involved in any kind of conflict because we cannot afford it ourselves. I mean, we have seen our history, how we have suffered. But there are times when you really cannot avoid it. And while Yemen, we were successful in remaining neutral and we conveyed it to Saudi Arabia and to all the countries. Think of a scenario when the conflict is at your border. What will you do then? These are serious questions that we must consider because the conflict is almost at your border. I mean, I don't want to sound, paint a horrible scene, but that's where it's headed. I mean, it may not happen. As I said in my talk also, I don't see a full-scale conflict with Iran taking place immediately. Not only for the fact that Iran itself cannot afford it, but also let's not forget Mr. Trump is not a conflict person. He is not a person don't forget he's the one who wanted to end the war in Afghanistan long before it actually ended. Because he's a businessman and he wants to make money. And he will look for ways in which Israel can dominate the Middle East and West Asia without actually going into a conflict. I mean, that's my perception of Mr. Trump. But when a conflict does come to the doors of West Asia, then we are just next door. So we have to be prepared also how we will deal with such a scenario. And the best way to do that is to actually strengthen yourself internally. If you have internal strength and you have a strong economy, or at least a stronger economy than we have now, then you will be able, and you are able to offer some ideas on how to resolve this conflict just by making statements. Statements are very important. Ambassador is right that we are in the UN, but we have seen how the UN has also been totally neutralized in this Gaza conflict. The poor Secretary General is not even allowed to visit Gaza anymore. So you can see the state of the international organization. But I think that we have to, and although it's not a good thing to say really, because I know that there's a lot of anti-India feeling as well. Not that I'm a pro-India person, I've never been, but we have to look at how India has managed to gain inroads into areas which were our strengths. Our good friends, our best friends are no longer our best friends. They are now good friends with India. So we have to try to see where we went wrong and where we can, improve ourselves so that we can match India. What does India have to offer to the Gulf and Middle East, which we are not able to offer? So, and that's why India's voice will be heard and ours will not. When it comes to Lebanon and Hezbollah, that was a comment from you. It's a very good, I did mention it very briefly, but you see, Don't forget, Lebanon and Syria have historical animosity as well. It's not to do with religion. It is also it's territorial as well. It is strategic as well. So whereas Hezbollah managed to gain the strength in Lebanon because they were facing an outside enemy and they were fighting an outside enemy, that is Israel, but they were not able to stop the conflict between, or the internal conflicts between inside Lebanon, and the anti-Syria feeling that Lebanese have and the anti-Lebanese feeling that Syrians have over it. So therefore, that's why I said that this Middle East is becoming more and more complicated, because not only is the Israeli element coming out and the Gaza genocide coming out, but it is also now exposing the internal fissures within these countries, how they are not getting along with each other. And that is now coming out as Hezbollah has been neutralized. So now people in Lebanon are asking that should we actually continue with the old policy of looking at regional politics? Shouldn't we focus more inside? And I'm sure that when with the Syria, I see Syria in more turmoil, as Ambassador Saab has mentioned. I see there is an actual fear of balkanization of Syria, because Syria may be divided into Kurds and the different areas, and that will be detrimental for the region. Now, somebody mentioned Hamas. You see, my only answer to that would be that Hamas was the legitimate government of Gaza. They were elected. They are not the terrorist group that the West likes to show them as. Yes, they are using extrajudicial means, but they were actually elected by the people of Gaza to represent them. So, Hamas comes into a different category. Iran, Pakistan, Parachinar, you see, the thing is that Iran, as I said in the beginning, is a very pragmatic nation. They realize the pressures on us. We have had sectarian issues in the past. Thankfully, we were able to overcome them. But Iran of course, has an interest in the Shia community here, and they will continue. That's why, the question that was raised by you about about Saudi and Iranian rivalry in Pakistan, we don't want those days to come back. They are, in fact, the rivalry can be taken in a positive way by inviting investments from both countries. Unfortunately, we are not doing that. We are just banking on one side rather than the other due to our own compulsions. But it is worrying, yes. But I think that those days have gone, because now Iran is facing a bigger threat. And the bigger threat that Iran is facing is internal and external. It is facing threats from inside. Previously, the regime was stronger. The regime is not so strong anymore. I mean, it's a reality. And it's facing the threat of Israel and the Middle East being torn apart, which will be detrimental for Iran. A nuclear Iran. Well, the thing is that if Iran goes nuclear, and most probably will, as Ambassador Azaz said, that they've already enriched their uranium to 90%. If it goes nuclear, what is stopping Israel from declaring its nuclear power, which is it's a quiet nuclear power? Then the whole region will become nuclearized, and a nuclear region is certainly not to our benefit. I mean, we will not be able to. We would never support that. Why Muslims don't use the religious card as the Jews do? Well, I think there's a simple reason. I mean, in my opinion, the simple answer is that Muslims are not united in the religion. There are various factions and various interpretations of religion that the Muslims themselves are believing in. And religion has never, unfortunately, I think in this Arab Ajam and this Islam versus non-Islamic countries, I think gone are the days when Muslims were united under the flag of Islam. I think Islam is now no longer the entity that will bind Muslims. It's more economic now. It's all a question of money. I mean, look at Saudi Arabia. The one country that was actually resisting the Israelis the most now is getting Israeli investment into Saudi Arabia. So I think the religion card cannot be played by us, because we're not united on that. These are my
I took my definition of the hegemon from the multiple hierarchy model by Douglas Lemke. And according to this model, the power differential between the key players has to be huge enough so that nobody can disrupt the existing status quo. For example, take the case of South Asia. India is the hegemon, Pakistan is the main challenger, then Bangladesh and Sri Lanka are the middle powers and small powers. So even if we want, we cannot disrupt this status quo, and we have to persist with the hierarchy. But in the Middle East, it's still in flux. There are key players which are contending for power, and we can say that Iran and Israel are the main two powers, but still the power hierarchy is far from established.
I definitely had an answer on sort of this idea of Eretz Israel and Greater Israel. So I think biblically, if you say it's from the Euphrates to the Nile, and however you want to draw that map, but I think to think of Israel currently wanting to establish Eretz Israel is a bit far-fetched. I know there is Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, the two members of cabinet that sort of are in that, but I think it's for another 100 years, you could be assured that there would be no Eretz Israel. There, if you see Israeli population, right, so 8 million Jews, right, 4 million Jews abroad. There's some memorials of after the 1973 war. They were on the gates of Cairo, and they said, if we would send something, a brigade inside Cairo, we would be lost. And so to think of Israel establishing, even now, even the settlements, when they're trying to establish it, there's big discussion within Israel, how would you secure these settlements? So to think of Israel sort of getting hold of Eretz Israel or sort of this greater Israel, I think it's a bit far-fetched, although of course it's it's in the discussion, but practically I think it doesn't hold. So I think this is more sort of conspiracy oriented rather than I think Israel thinks of its security rather than establishing Eretz Israel. So I think we should not be thinking in that sense. I had also sort of because there's a lot of talk on Syria, but I think Israel, there've been many reports that Israel was training the current sort of Syrians ever since the Arab Spring. I think when they started fighting Bashar al-Assad, these people came into Israel asking for Israeli help, and Israel started. And so a lot of things is a continuation of what Israel had already in mind. I have other thoughts, but for some other time. Thank you.
I think if I can think of takeaways, probably I would single out two. One, I think the overwhelming view was that we should not get involved practically into any warlike situation if it emerges. True that if war comes to your borders or a bordering country, you would need to take a stance. You would need to take positions. But Pakistan might not be in a position to play any practical role given our own internal issues. The second takeaway is that while the world is changing socially, economically, politically, perhaps Pakistan is stuck. And we need to focus inward now even more because the world is changing at a breathtaking pace, but we are really stuck in our own political instability and economic weaknesses and law and order and other issues. So I think that sort of theme comes out almost in every session that we attend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Azaz. We are just concluding the session. I will request Dr. Nadeem Mirza Saab to please come for vote of thanks, and then Ambassador Azaz will give the mementos to our speakers, and then we'll conclude.
So I will not be taking too much time because tea is ready and tea is getting cold, and cold tea is not a good thing. So, so I'll just be wrapping it up. Thank you very much to all the panelists. We have really had a very wonderful conversation on the evolving Middle Eastern situation, and this is exactly what we do here in IR. Middle East is being considered as a mess, if I may use this word. But international politics is a mess, basically. And we try to sort out that mess. We try to sort out the complexities of that mess. So Middle East has been Middle East since millennia. I mean, Islam just came, it's been 1,000 years, 1,400 years. I mean, before that, Ambassador Rifat rightly pointed out that these rivalries, these have been there since Persian, I mean, come on. Persian kingdoms, their diplomatic level, that they're just pragmatic behavior, I mean, that has remained unmatchable throughout the history, and of course the strategic culture of the Arabs. And Turks, the Ottomans. So Middle East has been Middle East. Yeah? This is something, international politics has been international politics. And this is exactly what we have been trying to understand. So world is changing. International politics is changing. And it is not something new. I mean, this has been changing since the world is there. And this is exactly what we try to understand. And thank you very much, Ambassador Azaz, again. And we are very much looking forward to have future collaborations on such issues, because academic, I mean practitioners and academia, so this is something which have been lacking. And I think it's really great initiative on the part of Ambassador Azaz, and we're very much looking forward. And please join your hand together for this, all the panelists. Thank you.